Everyone, and thanks for joining us for our online launch event. Obviously, we had this event in person back in November, but we wanted to make sure everyone could try and join it and watch our event that wasn't able to attend in person, or maybe you want to watch it for a second time in here. So thanks again for those that joined along. So what we'll do is get us started with things. So first of all, thanks for joining us. What we've got here for our launch event for 2026 to show off all the kind of new features that have came with 2026, we're going to be using a model from a SOLIDWORKS customer, Vermeer. So this is the model we'll use, and we'll use various different sections of the model as we go through the presentation. To get us started and introduced to the model, we've got a little kind of video to showcase and show what the kind of model does going forward.
Vermeer is fully integrated. We take raw steel and we make machine drawings, so we make assembly drawings. We do virtually everything right here on the mile. Vermeer, when I started, was a $300 million company. Now it's a $2 billion company. SOLIDWORKS has grown with us to the size that we are today. When I started, it would have been '89, and drafting boards were the tool at the time at which we created our engineering drawings. Then we wanted to get into assembly drawings, and that's when we got into trouble. 2D collapses and falls apart.
We'd have all the parts laid on top of each other, but that was only in one dimension. It's very common to design something up and then find out these parts don't even fit together.
And so how do we move to the next step? And that's when we knew we had to start thinking in 3D. It became, who are we going to team up with to move towards the next one? It became SOLIDWORKS.
SOLIDWORKS was brought on board in 1999. We were the first SOLIDWORKS customer to have over 100 seats of SOLIDWORKS.
The speed, comparing 2D to 3D, there's a huge difference there. We had to do overlays because we could only put 32K in one file.
It didn't require the engineer to have so much imagination about how parts fit together. It made the engineering job so much easier.
When I saw SOLIDWORKS, I was like, this is going to completely change and revolutionize mechanical design.
The ability and the power that has grown with it over the time has really been nice, where before we could pull in a few parts, small assemblies, just because of the hardware limitations. Nowadays, I can pull in an entire machine of thousands of parts, and it runs quite well.
We can model things, we can learn how things fit before we build the physical thing, which really accelerates our time frame.
And that all was about how we communicate the complexity of our machines throughout the organization.
That ability of SOLIDWORKS to bring things older, newer, more quickly, it just continues to accelerate. It allows us to offer repair parts. It allows us to keep designs similar from older and newer things rather than having to do complete start over. We can always use some amount of past data to help us with those future things. And now we're getting into the simulation type things, that confidence that if you have a design, you really understand what the loading's going to do to it, how the parts are going to fit together, you understand how they move together. That really allows you to focus on the actual engineering and designing things. Makes the job continue to be fun.
In July of 2018, we had a EF3 tornado.
This one didn't stop. This one actually did hit. So we lost, I'm going to say, a third of our manufacturing square footage.
And our goal was to actually get back up into production. Part of that was to find different manufacturing locations throughout the area.
We were scattered out and about, and we were still able to function.
We were back up into full production in 60 days.
The year of the tornado, we had a record year. The backbone that we put in to run SOLIDWORKS, we were able to run it at any location.
The partnership with SOLIDWORKS and Dassault Systems continues to grow. We would not be the company we are today without SOLIDWORKS. It is used for 100% of all our mechanical CAD design, and we use it worldwide.
Over the next 10 to 15 years, I expect the Vermeer SOLIDWORKS relationship to continue to grow, to solve the new problems, to leverage the new technology. The next generation can come and see the work of the past and then we can keep absorbing and growing our knowledge base as a company.
Alright, so that was just a little bit about the product there and the company that we'll be using as we go through our presentation. Obviously, kind of presenting today, we're going to have myself, James and William. There'll be three of our presenters. And then in the kind of background, we'll have your three kind of different account managers as well. So that way, if you see anything that you really like the look of, or a product maybe you don't quite have a license for that, they'll be the guys that will be able to help you out with that side of things. But getting us started with the kind of main event, if you like, what we're going to be looking at is not only going to be the enhancements in 2026, but we're also going to do some sections where we'll do a bit of a sort of look back, and that's where we'll look at some of the enhancements that have came with 2025, all the way from SP0 or GA, all the way up to SP kind of 4 and SP5 in there. For that, we will be using the model that we used last year, so you will be able to tell the difference whenever we're looking at stuff that was added in with 2026, or whether it was stuff with 2025. It will correspond to the different models that we'll be using throughout the presentation, and that we'll see the Vermeer model, and we're also going to start to lay things out a little bit like a sort of SolidWorks drawing. So that's where we're going to have a little bit of a sort of title block down at the bottom right. We've got a little bill of materials for all of our different sections that we're going to go through today, and then we've got some balloons to show you what areas of the model we'll use for that particular section. So we'll use different parts of the models as we go through things. So getting us started with the first section of today, we're going to take a little look at a kind of a highlighted feature. So this is going to be something that was actually added in SolidWorks 2025, this first enhancement, but it's one that came with one of the later service packs. So it was something that we weren't quite able to showcase during the launch event a kind of year ago when we initially showed 2025, and that's going to be all around the kind of topic of selective loading. So there's three kind of parts to this feature that we're going to look at. First is going to be kind of trying to accelerate the design workflow, particularly with large assemblies. Rather than having to open all of the large assembly kind of fully resolved, which might take quite a bit of time, we'll be able to see how we can open just a small sub-assembly or a selection of parts, which will speed up the process of opening what we need to edit. We'll look at using some filtering tools, so that way we can create filters for those different sections, so we don't have to manually select them every single time we want to reuse this. And we'll also see how those filters can be used as part of kind of governance in terms of a kind of workflow and tasks, that sort of idea in there. So taking a look at the first part when it comes to selective opening, we've got here our Vermeer model, which we've got in total thousands of components that build this up, but we don't necessarily have to want to spend the time to open all of these up if only a couple of the sub-assembly components is what maybe we need to be working on at any given time. But we might still need the rest of the model to be kind of there in terms of any references, that sort of idea. We don't want any messages popping up saying we're missing a reference or anything's out of date. What we can do is with the 3D Experience platform, what we can do is create what's referred to as a filter. We can then select the components, whether it be individual parts or sub-assemblies or a mix of kind of both. We can select those and then apply them to a filter. That filter we can then also access from inside SolidWorks. So on the right hand side we can search for the name of that filter, and it will then just open up the components that were part of that filter, which makes the opening process much quicker, and there rather than having to load all of our model, but it won't have any issues with any references missing, that sort of idea. We can also start to apply additional information to that filter. So we can add any sort of properties or attributes to that filter. We can modify the filters after they've been created. We can create multiple filters as well. And then we can use those filters as part of any collaborative tasks. So with the Experience platform, if we're using any tasks, we can have them be included in there. Same on the right hand side of SolidWorks, if we have our kind of collaborative tasks open up, so we can see what kind of work we've got to do, what work's in progress, and even kind of what work's complete. we can link them to filters so that if we're passing that information to a colleague, they quickly know what files they need to open up and can open them up nice and quickly from inside there. We can have multiple filters as well. So the same part could be part of multiple different filters if required. And those filters can also be linked to both revisions and a maturity state. So that way we can say we're going to reuse this filter over and over again. So the maturity state might be it's kind of in work, it's in progress, that sort of idea. Or we could say that it's kind of released and it's complete. And we can start to link them to our files as well. So if we want some kind of traceability to see what filters were maybe used in the creation of like a drawing, if we looked at the relations in the 3D Experience platform, then the filter will appear as part of the relations, whether you're looking at a drawing or maybe you're looking at an assembly. Those will still appear in there together. So for those of us that are using the 3D Experience platform, that selective opening can be something that's really useful when it comes to really large assemblies and just working on individual components rather than necessarily relying on things like configurations, which can still be very good and have their own benefits from there. What I'll then do for the next section, we'll go through the parts. I'll pass it over to my colleague William, who will take us through that section.
Perfect. Thanks, Greg. So yeah, moving on to parts. So we're just going to briefly cover what's covered in parts in 2026. So you'll now be able to offsheet sheet metal base flanges from their original sketch plane. You can break both external and internal corners quickly, delete equations that would otherwise cause the Feature Manager tree errors. Next is there are improved previews and user interface for corner treatments with structure systems, and you can leverage cut list properties for PLM and ERP systems, define reference points using numerical X, Y, and Z values, and then finally, you can specify bounding box directions using coordinate systems for greater control. Let's have a look at these in action, starting off with base flanges. So normally with sheet metal base flanges are extruded from the sketch plane. However, in some cases, it might be useful to maybe offset the sheet metal base flange from the plane that was originally sketched on. So in 2026, what it allows you to do is offset that base flange by a specified amount, or by a vertex, or even by a surface face or plane. This gives you more flexibility when creating sheet metal parts. Next is break corners. So you've always been able to break exterior corners. Just select the break corner tool and select all corners to apply chamfered of filtered treatments. 2026 now expands this functionality to internal corners, making the treatment of sharp internal corners much simpler. Next is delete with equations. So equations in SOLIDWORKS are used in features and sketches to create links or conditions to dimensions that would otherwise normally be impossible. However, when you sort of deleted a feature containing equations, the equations would be left dangling, causing errors in the design tree. With 2026, you can now simply select the delete equations checkbox to automatically delete those without errors. Okay, next thing is structure systems. In SOLIDWORKS Design 2026, structure system corner treatments are more consistently colored to indicate the corner type. And now when you select a complex corner to modify, there's a brand new graphical selection pane that appears, giving you complete and intuitive control of the corner treatment with better previews than before. Next are cut list properties. So cut lists gather all bodies for easy categorization and the creation of your bill of materials. However, maybe it's difficult to access this information for downstream workflows such as SOLIDWORKS PDM, the 3D Experience platform, or any other PDM, PLM, or ERP system. In 2026, it enables you to reference cut list properties such as description, total length, and more within the configuration properties, making this information more easily accessible without having to rely on workarounds. Next are reference points. In the past, you would need existing geometry to create reference points. In 2026, you can now define the position of reference points using numeric X, Y, and Z values. Here we can see they are being used to generate a layout for what would have otherwise been a challenging 3D sketch, which is then used as the path for a sweep feature. Next are bounding boxes. Sometimes it may be beneficial to orientate the bounding box along a specific plane. However, if the part geometry changes significantly, then SOLIDWORKS may change the direction, which is defined by length, width, or thickness. So now in 2026, you can specify these directions based on a user-defined coordinate system. That means that the defined direction X, Y, or Z will always associate with the bounding box definition. For example, the bounding box width defined by X direction is 33 inches, which is greater than the length of 30 inches. When we change the part configuration to the shorter length, the bounding box width is now 27 inches, while the bounding box length is maintained at 30 inches, and it essentially did not swap due to the change in geometry. Now we're just going to have a look back at some of the features that came out in 2025 for its various service packs. So in 2025 FD01, we had the ability to set the flange length to a specified vertex, include DIMXPERT dimensions with library features, and adding attributes when you create a new SOLIDWORKS file. Let's have a look at these in action. Starting off with the edge flange. So in 2025 FD01, the edge flange tool introduced the option to set the edge flange length by distance to a selected vertex. Selecting the edges of the part to start the edge flange, and then using the up to vertex option allows you to choose a point on a sketch or geometry. The edge flange no longer requires a dimension value and is controlled by the position of the vertex. Next is adding a design library feature. This now gives the option to include MBD dimensions. Right. Yeah. So you now have the option to include MBD dimensions when you're creating a library feature. This saves a couple of clicks and allows you to essentially reuse that library feature in other models. For example, once we've added this, we can insert it into a model, and we should see the MBD dimensions also appear once those have been inserted. Next is in 2025 FD01, we have the ability to set a template from the 3D Experience tab, allowing you to enter the value of attributes before the file is created. So here, for example, we can set the description, make or buy, as well as the finish required. These values will populate the file properties and can be viewed in the various 3D Experience platform apps. Okay, so next in 25 FD02, we saw pinning commands such as the fillet and chamfer tools, shift key to establish equal length relations, and multi-language support with design tables. Let's have a look at these in action. As mentioned, the pin button became available in common commands such as the fillet and chamfer tools. This boosts efficiency because it essentially allows you to create the same but different features without having to reactivate the command every time. For example, we can apply a 0.25 inch fillet on these edges, then a 0.05 inch fillet on the other parts of the model without having to close in the command and activate the command. The same can be achieved using the chamfer tool. Next are sketch squares. Let's first create a sketch and activate the rectangle tool. So we'll just sketch out the rectangle first. When placing the rectangle onto the sketch, you can now hold the Shift key to establish equal length relations. So that's holding the Shift key. This creates a square shape and saves you having to apply the equal relations after the sketch is placed. Finally, we have multi-language support for design tables. If SOLIDWORKS detects the column headers in the design table are in a different language compared to the default one set on your SOLIDWORKS installation, it will display a prompt to give you the option to either translate or do not translate the column headers, as we can see here. Selecting the translate option will translate and match the column headers to the same language that is currently set in the installation. And that is what's new with parts. I will now pass you over to James.
So here, first of all, the cosmetic change. The first one here, this cosmetic change indicator. If we go into it now, when we apply this, now make some changes to things like the parts within the assembly. What it will do is it will not mark the assembly as dirty in terms of needing a rebuild and save. So in this case, in the part, we're moving around sketch planes which don't require any sort of child features on them, moving the sketch planes around, adjusting the sketches, hiding them, adding even appearances and things will do it. In this case, this plane didn't have any child features, so it's not actually changing the part at all. So none of this is affecting the assembly, and that's why it's maintaining the, in this case, the square bracket indicator, so there's only cosmetic change being applied. Now, if we go in and again adjust appearances to the part level, it's still maintaining that just cosmetic change indicator. However, if we were to go in and make changes to the part and let's say adjust it, but then cancel them out, still no changes have occurred, and that's again just showing that bracket no change indicator for that. So it doesn't necessarily need to be saved then when you're finished. Again, saving rebuild and save times on large assemblies. Next one up is enhancements to tables. So this is for managing display states and configurations. There's new drop downs that have been added to basically tidy up the table by default in terms of things like the reference display state being hidden by default. And it's the same treatment that configurations have. So here we can again turn them on and off as required for display states. And in configurations, usually when you add parts, it will add 3 columns for suppressed, configuration and fixed. By default, it will just bring in suppressed, but you, if you do want access to those other tables, can add them on and add and delete them as required. So that is the new enhancements to configuration display state tables. Next up here is the automation in terms of fasteners. Now this takes parts that are not toolbox parts and makes them somewhat behave like toolbox parts in terms of automatically mating them in position when dragged over appropriate geometry. So in this case, the fasteners can just be dragged around and those aren't toolbox parts. It also works just dragging them in from outside SOLIDWORKS. And how this works is SOLIDWORKS has been trained on thousands and thousands of the Windows preview images to detect what is a fastener, so that's how it knows what a fastener is just by looking at the Windows preview image. So you can drag them in and easily place them if you've got them from somewhere else, some online website or anything. That's what's new in 26. We'll now look back to what was added in the various service packs in 25. So here, the disable auto resolve in the feature manager tree. So this is when you've opened a assembly in lightweight mode. The previous behavior, which we'll see here, is when you open a sub-assembly, it's then going to resolve that sub-assembly, and if you want to drill down at the tree, you might have several resolve steps to wait through. There's a new option which you can disable, which is the auto resolve option here, and what that will do is it will change the behavior, so now it will no longer auto resolve all these sub-assemblies as we expand the tree. So if we take a look at another one of these, for example here, it is not resolving that. It allows us to browse through our tree nice and quickly. It only loads there what's in lightweight, but obviously if any of these parts or sub-assemblies we want to resolve, we can just right click on them and resolve them. So it allows you to browse through this tree nice and quickly if you are more used to finding a component through the tree rather than in the assembly itself. So that's what's new in assemblies. I'll now pass you back to Craig, who's going to look at drawings.
Alright, thanks for that, James. So yeah, what I'll do is take us through some of the enhancements to the SOLIDWORKS side of things when it comes to the drawing environment. So first we'll look at an example. We'll use the auto-generate drawings. So that's where we'll start to use a little bit of AI to kind of automate the process of creating our drawings. It'll be a little bit intelligent in terms of where it places things and what it places. We'll then look at some enhancements to magnetic lines, where it doesn't have to only be used for balloons, which is what it was originally made for. We'll then look at an enhancement to breaking dimension lines to try and tidy things up when things might overlap slightly, so trying to increase the readability of our drawings. We'll then look at a change where we can have kind of custom text when it comes to geometric tolerance and the frames and the fields that are in there. We'll then have a slight enhancement to the surface finish indicators based on depending on what standard you're using. So having a look at the first example here, we've got the auto-generate drawings. So there might be an example where we've got a number of different parts and we need a handful of different drawings all created for those individual components. What we can do is, using the 3D Experience platform, is start to have kind of SOLIDWORKS create those drawings automatically in the background. So this is where this will appear as a section on the right hand side, and as you're continuing to work on maybe completely other models, completely different files, SOLIDWORKS can generate those drawings. And it'll be intelligent enough to know whether or not the model or the file you've selected is a part or is it an assembly. Is it something that should maybe have a bill of materials? Is it something maybe where you've used some weldments or sheet metal features, therefore maybe you need a cut list, you have some balloons in there, and it will try to also read kind of what drawing views it thinks you might need in terms of, is it just a front, a top and a right, or would it be better if maybe there was a detail view or a section view in there. It will start to add them automatically and be a little bit intelligent in that way. That way it can again give you either a complete result that you're happy with, or maybe you just need to make some minor adjustments to kind of meet any requirements that you have. But for creating large amounts of drawings, this can definitely speed up that process and help out. Magnetic lines, they were something that were introduced quite a number of years ago and were initially used and created to help with the balloons. So we could add balloons to the magnetic lines. However, now, with 2026, we can start to add pretty much any of our different annotations that we would have in our drawing, whether it be datums, basic notes that we've added in, surface finish symbols, geometric tolerances, pretty much any of our annotations. We can attach them to those magnetic lines or pull them apart just as we would with the balloons that we're used to. The next enhancement is with the option to break dimension lines. So it's relatively common in a SOLIDWORKS drawing, particularly when we've got quite a lot of dimensions, that we might have some dimensions that would kind of overlap. But what we can do is now break that, and we can see as we start to move this dimension around, if it would overlap another dimension, it will just start to break those lines a little bit. If we add in a new dimension, then we can simply just update, and then any points where it should have a line maybe broken, SOLIDWORKS can add that kind of broken line in there to try and increase the readability and make things look generally just a little bit neater and tidier in our drawing. When it comes to the geometric tolerances, if we go in and start to create our geometric tolerance and we place that kind of next to what we want, we'll see obviously a little wizard where we can add the various different steps that we've got in there. What we can then do is start to add our different kind of frames. So in here we might add some additional frames for maybe our 3 different datums, but what we can now do is add additional text that would be linked to that geometric tolerance. So in here we've got some additional information that we've placed below, that could easily be placed above or to the side in there. So it just allows us to add some additional text. We can add obviously whatever we want in there. We also have a change to the surface finish symbols. So based on our new kind of option in here, we'll have a new option to choose kind of the standard when it comes to our annotations for surface finishes. So from our drop down, it's just been updated to slightly newer standard, so we can select that from there, and then when we go to add in any of our surface finish symbols, the symbols that are obviously shown will be updated, and we can use the new options that it's got in here. So we can add that there, and then we can obviously attach that to where it should be placed in there. So it's just an update to the options that we've got based on some updated standards inside SOLIDWORKS. What we'll then look at is going to be a couple of enhancements that came with SOLIDWORKS 2025. So with FDO1, we had an option for flattened bill of materials, where we can show the total quantities for those. The bill of materials can also have be affected by the display states if we're using them. So if we have anything kind of hidden out. And then we have a new new table type called a family table that we can add in. So having a look at the flattened BOM, here we've got a couple of components that are maybe kind of indented at the moment in terms of having a kind of 5.1, 5.2. If we change that to the flattened option, then what it will do is not only flatten it so we don't have the 0.1, 0.2, it'll increase the numbers slightly, but it'll start to see how many of those components are in any of our assemblies anywhere, and start to just include the total quantities of those. If in our models we have display states, what we could do here is select maybe a different display state which will hide out a couple of our components that may be created in our assembly. When we now go to create our bill of materials, we'll have an option to link that bill of materials to a display state. That way it's not going to try and add in rows to the bill of materials for any components that are hidden out in that display state, which subsequently means if we then added in some balloons, it's not going to add in any additional balloons that maybe have a little kind of question mark or star, but it doesn't know where to put the little leader line to in there. That's a nice option there. What we then have is a new type of table referred to as a family table. So in this little part we've got 4 different configurations, and those have slightly different, in this case, diameters, but it could be different lengths or really any size, any dimension could be changing. If we come to our drawing and insert our family table, what it will then do is add in a row for each of the different configurations, and then any time that there's some information changing, then it can have columns for that. So in this case the length and the diameter is changing. Technically in the background as well, we also have a part number assigned in the configuration properties, and also configuration properties have a different description for each of those as well. So we can just have columns shown for it, which can be a nice easy way to show all of different information from our tables. With FDO2 we had some changes to the cut lists. We also had some display expression changes in terms of the kind of visibility and how we can hide and show certain stuff, and an enhancement to revision tables. So when it comes to kind of weldments and sheet metal, and we have normally our cut list. So in here we've got a number of different lengths, but depending on what sort of units and stuff we use, you could have ended up with a table where some units are maybe shown in kind of millimeters, some bits maybe shown in inches, could be millimeters and in centimeters. But here we'll have a new option where we can say to always use our document properties and the units that are part of our document properties. So that way, when we go back to our drawing, any information that we've maybe had from kind of cut list IDs will match what the length is. So we've got the same units being used throughout the drawing, so we don't have any sort of discrepancies in there. Also, I have some changes to kind of controlling the visibility of some annotations. So what I've got down here at the bottom right is part of our title block, and obviously we might normally have various different notes in our title block, but without editing the sheet format, it might not necessarily be possible to see, is there actually a note in there, and it's just that maybe I've not put in who drew the file or when it was drawn or anything like that, or is it that the note's kind of broken, somebody's deleted it, that sort of idea. So with this new option, we can show in the drawing if there would be a note in there, depending obviously whether we're pulling information from the part or I should say from the model or from the drawing, whether it's kind of $PRP sheet, it will start to show us. Then we can have a look at where that's pulling from to see maybe what's the reason for any information being blank in there. We then have an option for the revision tables side of things. So this option is going to be specific to those of us that are using the 3D Experience platform. But what we can have is the revision table always showing what a row for the initial revision. So in here we can say always show the first revision. We can obviously control how many total rows we might want to see. So in this case we see A, because that was the first one in there. And then obviously if we're only showing 2 maximum, we'll have that first one and then whatever the latest revision is, which in this case is E, which could then change to F and so on and so forth. So nice wee enhancement there. I know a couple of our customers had actually been asking for that. For the next little section on MBD, we'll actually stick with myself. So what we'll do is look at a couple of wee changes here to the MBD side of things. But there'll be a change to kind of more closely match what we're familiar with other areas of SOLIDWORKS when it comes to hide and shown annotations. And we'll also have a little change to the filters that we could use for those annotations as well. So with our part here, we've got obviously a number of different annotations added in. What we can do is hide and show those annotations in the same way that we could in, for example, a SOLIDWORKS drawing. And then when we select that hide and show option, anything that's been hidden would be shown in a sort of light grey colour. And then simply clicking on those would then re-show any of those annotations. So that's where we can just kind of more closely match what we're used to with drawings. If we wanted to create kind of an MBD user model-based definition side of things. With those, we can also start to use filters. So if we change on the left to our DIMXPERT tab, we'll now have a little filter option where we can start to type in kind of the names of a annotation or a type of annotation. So for example, we could search for the word radius, start of the word radius, and get any of those values start to appear. Or if we're looking for the kind of position of holes, start to type in the word position, and we can get any of the kind of position annotations that we've added in. So just 2 wee simple enhancements there when it comes to the MBD side of things. So what I'll do is I'll pass it over to my colleague who will take us through the routing side of things.
Perfect, thank you Greg. So yeah, I'm going to now take you to the routing. So in 2026 for routing we have an improved and streamlined user interface for pipe and tube coverings, which now has reusable favorites, the ability to use sketching as routing guidelines for auto route. Then finally, enhancements to drawings where views, tables and annotations can automatically adjust when the sheet format has changed. Let's have a look at these in action. Starting off with the streamlined user interface for pipe and tube coverings. By editing the route and using the coverings command, you can apply either the out-of-box layers or create your own using the materials library. Once you've defined the cover material and layer thickness, and then applied it to the segments of the route. In 26, you will have the ability to save that as a group using the favorites drop-down menu in the covering property manager. This makes applying covers easier than before, allowing you to reuse the same settings and applying it to other existing routes. For example, we can edit this existing route, select the holes, and then use the group named Vermeer that we just created from, and just select that from our favorites drop-down menu. Next is sketch guided auto routes. So this is for electrical routing. With an assembly of this scale, and just like in many similar assemblies with a variety of motions, it's important to keep the wires, cables, and harnesses neatly organized. As you all know, we have the auto route functionality, and it does save a tremendous time. In 2026 now, with the auto route tool, is the ability to use guidelines to follow a sketch that defines the path of the route. With the electrical components and connection points established from a from-to list, we can then create a 3D sketch that drives the route, and then use that guideline option to follow the sketch, which will help us organize the wires and cables harnesses within that route. Finally, we have sheet formats with routing drawings. When detailing a flattened electrical route, it is often necessary to adjust the size of the drawing. There might be many tables, annotations, and dimensions, and then we maybe run out of space within the drawing sheet. This is often done by either rescaling the views or adjusting the sheet format to a different size. In 2026, we can now navigate or switch to a different sheet format while the drawing maintains the proper size and ratio of all views, tables, and annotations. Everything shifts proportionally. We might just need to move some items around to adjust to the new sheet side of the drawing, but we don't sort of have to modify the scales. And that's it for routing. I'll now pass you over to Craig.
Alright, thanks for that, William. So, yeah, what I'll do is take us through just a couple of enhancements when it comes to the rendering side of things. You might notice the topic here just refer to it as rendering rather than necessarily visualize, because some of the enhancements we'll look at aren't necessarily in visualize. So we've got some changes inside SOLIDWORKS to use the DSPBR appearances that were previously added in to visualize. We'll now also have an option where we can start to actually create visualize renders inside the SOLIDWORKS application itself. And for the visualize side of things, for those of us that have got AMD graphics cards, we'll now have the kind of stellar fast mode, which can help keep things kind of looking the way we want, but also with the kind of improved performance. So first one, when it comes to the DSPBR appearances, these were added in to visualize a couple of years ago, but now we've got them inside SOLIDWORKS. So what we can start to do is, as we apply our various different appearances, or if we apply a material, obviously all our materials in the materials database in SOLIDWORKS comes with appearances as well. Those have all been updated, so that way when we start to look at things should start to look a little bit more kind of realistic, which can start to give us some kind of better visuals in there. But taking those visuals, and if we were to try and take like just a snip into of those, still maybe not the ideal option. So that's where we'll start to use the second enhancement here, where we can start to create renders inside SOLIDWORKS. So some of you a number of years ago might have been familiar with PhotoView 360, which was kind of stopped being supported really from 2017, so a good number of years now. What I've got now inside SOLIDWORKS is the visualize render side of things. So without leaving the SOLIDWORKS application, we can obviously apply all those DSPBR appearances, maybe add a couple of bits of lighting, maybe add a scene in the background, and then we can start to get much more realistic images that if we want to put on our website, use for marketing material, maybe send to a client to show what their model that you're building would look like. And this is kind of one example of one of the results that we could get from there. So that's something that can definitely help, I think, a lot of customers, rather than just using the window snipping tool, which I think a lot of people still use. Last enhancement here we'll look at is just the stellar fast render mode. So for those of us that had like NVIDIA graphics cards, will maybe be familiar with this. Obviously those of us with an AMD graphics card will now have the render mode at the top, so where we see the little yellow circle at the top. That means we don't have to use the kind of fast mode, which then you would see all your cameras and some other stuff and things won't necessarily look the best in the fast mode. But also you don't need to go all the way to the accurate mode, where everything's kind of been fully rendered, and therefore it'll be a bit slower. So we have that sort of middle ground in there, which can help with the setup, and then obviously you can do your final render at the end after that. So that was just a couple of enhancements there when it comes to kind of rendering with SOLIDWORKS.
Alright, the next section we're going to look at is the user experience and import. So first of all, a new option here is to import models in a background process. So this is if you've got a lot of neutral files, rather than locking up your SOLIDWORKS while you're importing, you can just have those import in the background, and then once they're ready, it'll give you a wee notification for you to start using them. There's also been improvements to the filters. This is where you can bring up the filter selection in terms of edges, vertices. You now have the options for components and features as well there to make selections. So let's take a look at those and some more. There's also options for selections. So what we have is the options when we're doing body selection, filtering by things like size or within a defined volume. The warning messages that you'll get at various times when you've got errors or any other issues opening files. If you have previously dismissed them, there'll be a wee pop-up just in the bottom right. If you have dismissed them, if anyone was to show up, it'll pop up there. And there's also been improvements to the rebuild performance for more complex assemblies. So here we'll take a look at the new filters. So in this case we have this kind of complex control assembly. And what we want to do is to potentially select some of the subcomponents of it. So in this case here, we'll just get the video playing here. So there it is, the background import is just working away in the background importing. So here, if we want to import models, we can just get the import tab, select that step file, and select it, and then in the background it'll open, and then once it's finished it will let us know for us to then afterwards use it within SOLIDWORKS. So they're not locking us up. So now in terms of if we want to select these joysticks, so these are are in buttons, we want to apply the appearances to them. Let's say we want to apply the red appearance to the entire component, then previously we'd have to select that component, then go into the appearance options and make sure we select the entire component. Now what we'll be able to do is just filter for the component selection, and by selecting this will pick either the top level subassembly, or if the part is just in itself, the whole part, and we can apply appearances and do other options and selections to it much quicker by that filter selection. It's the same in parts with features as well, which we'll look at next. So just that filter menu you can bring up with the F5 key to bring that up. So we'll look at the same in parts now. So opening up this part here, the new option for features. So it might be a case that you want to make a selection on features to either apply appearances to, or to suppress features or delete features. Rather than have to hunt them out in the design tree, you can now directly select them with the filter feature button there in the feature selection. So it just makes selecting things a wee bit easier. Rebuild performance, so in this case we have this comparison between SOLIDWORKS 26 and 25. It's just a rather complex assembly, which is just really the same VMware model patterned many times, and we can see the more complex rebuild has went faster in 2026. So you can see improvements there with the rebuild. There's a new warning sort of pop-up when it comes to if you're working across multiple different resolutions and scalings. So if you're, let's say, opening SOLIDWORKS previously on a different monitor than what is the main one, let's say you've got a laptop and a 4K display, then a lot of the icons can appear quite small or quite zoomed in, depending on what you're doing with that. And this can cause a bit of confusion on what's going on. So this warning will now let you know what's going on in terms of the scaling behavior. and then how to sort of fix it, whether you want to move SOLIDWORKS onto your main monitor, or open up your Windows settings to change what is the main monitor and then use SOLIDWORKS on that one. So in terms of whatever your main monitor is, that's what SOLIDWORKS will scale to. So it's just a wee warning just to let you know what's going on with that one. And let's look at some of the enhancements that have came during 2025. So there's new options for a simplified interface. So SOLIDWORKS can have a lot of options, and there'll be a new drop down we can select a simplified interface. So whether you're starting with SOLIDWORKS or you just don't need all the extra commands, we can filter it down from there. Reloading from the server. So previously you're able to reload models just from the local disk, but now there'll be an option if you're using 3D Experience to reload from the server. And a new wee warning when it comes to if in an assembly, if you move a component and it moves quite a large distance, it'll give you a warning for that one, the ability to undo it quickly. So let's see these in action. So the new simplified interface, what it will do is just a drop down in your view menu. So we'll go into the view menu here, and under the workspace we can go simplified interface, and this will just tidy up a lot of the tabs, tidy up a lot of the interface just to bring down what you can see, and that just makes it a lot simpler, less overwhelming with the number of commands available that SOLIDWORKS has. And you can take advantage of that and the command predictor to be able to still access all the commands you may need to use. Reload from server. So here, if you are got all your files stored in the 3D Experience platform and you want to reload, so basically a close and reopen operation, here we can just go reload and pick the option to reload from server, and then we can pick for just that file or also all of its references. So if you've been making changes locally and you decide you don't like them and you want to revert them, you don't need to close and reopen or anything like that. Or if your colleagues have saved new versions to the platform and you want to pull them down, you can easily reload again rather than having to close and reopen. The component displacement warning, so here we can see that in action. In this case we've just got sort of two parts here, and we move them what looks like a small distance, but actually in reality one of them is displaced in different directions a lot further. So just be a little warning of that one that we can undo just to save us scrolling around our whole model trying to move that back in position or anything like that one. Just a nice little enhancement there. Some other things that have been added also in terms of additions to command search, our recent documents, and the unplanned offline mode. So we'll look at these in action. So command search has always been available to easily find commands throughout the menus. But what you're now able to do is add custom search terms to these. So for example, in this case, the save as new, one of the terms that we can also search to get that is convert. So we hit search convert, save as is right there for us. So then by searching that we can access that command. So handy if you want to, rather than having to remember the exact name of the command, if you want to give it a custom name that you can search for, you can do that. Here what we want to do is maybe add a file type. So if we want to always export files as STL, then rather than have to search and remember it's export, we can just search for STL, and there's the export command to use for that one. So nice and easy to add or use any of the sort of the custom keyword searches there for that one. Recent documents. If you do have access to multiple platforms, now the recent documents tab in the sort of the home page here for SOLIDWORKS will be specific to what sort of space you're operating in. So if you do operate multiple spaces or platforms, then it'll be specific to those, and you'll no longer have the issue of potentially seeing multiple different files from different spaces or platforms there. The unplanned offline mode, so this is where if you do lose connection while in SOLIDWORKS, you'll be able to still continue working with that one. And also there's options there, so we'll take a look at this one. So here, already been added is the ability to go offline and use your license offline with the SOLIDWORKS, the named user SOLIDWORKS from 3D Experience. What we'll now be able to do is, if we're working on it and we lose connection, then we're not going to be losing a work or anything, we'll still be able to keep working. And then when we save it, it'll of course just save locally because we can't connect to the platform. But then once we do get connected again, we'll just be able to sort of save that back to the platform. So it'll just prompt us to work offline there, and then we can continue working with no interruption there. So if your internet does go down for any reason, you're not locked out from using it at all here. And then once we regain connection to the internet, we'll be able to then resave that back to the platform. So in this case, when we get the internet back, we just need to relaunch SOLIDWORKS, and that will initiate the connection to the platform. And in this case, we've got all those changes saved locally. We can then just save those up back to the platform to synchronize it back to everyone. The tree display, so at the moment, for every part in assembly, they can have, depending on their configurations and their display states, etc., they can have quite long names in the tree. Now, there is the option for each component to set the different display here for this one. Now, obviously, some people might have their own preference of what they want to see. They might not want to see all that extra information. So the new system option to override the specific component setting for the display of the different names in the tree. So now with that override, it's just going to shorten them to whatever you pick as the default. So if you want to see more information, you can add that to more information. If you want to see less, then you can override it with less as well. So you've got that option. Now when you are overriding it, you won't be able to set what the component level specific one is. So if you do want to adjust for the component one, you need to turn your system level override off for that. Large assembly performance, so similar to navigating the tree in lightweight mode within SOLIDWORKS, it's the same in the My Session pane. So previously in your My Session, it would just load all of the metadata in one go in terms of the file structure. What you'll now be able to do is, if you turn off the option for the refresh, then that's just the same as the lightweight resolving of the structure. Here, it will just load the top level structure and then only load that extra data when you expand it. So behaving just the same way as the new option for your Assemblies design tree. So the unplanned offline mode, so this is now also when you launch SOLIDWORKS. So here, rather than losing connection mid-use, here if you launch it and it can't connect to the platform, then you'll get up to 30 days of working offline until you next reconnect to the platform. So handy if you launch your computer, as long as you've got that desktop shortcut and you don't have access to the internet, then you can still get using SOLIDWORKS. So there's no need to worry about that or anything. So that's us with the import. I'll now pass it across to William, who'll look at the various new enhancements to collaboration.
Perfect. Thank you, James. So moving on to collaboration. So many of these features came out within the 2025 FD releases, starting off with Aura, which is an AI virtual companion. We also have saving configurations as a new file on the 3D Experience platform. You can now access the user forms directly within SOLIDWORKS. There's now the share command is within the file menu. You can automatically update drawings with the latest PLM change properties. Save cut list items to the 3D Experience platform. Store an externally linked design table on the platform. We also have the formable components now, as well as automatic refresh of file location bookmarks. We also have a 3D Swim integrations, Office document routes, and a streamlined bookmark navigation. And finally, we can now organize conversations into customized sections, add comments to file iteration saves, and finally, smart components are also now supported on the 3D Experience platform. Let's have a look at these in action then. First is Aura, which is your AI companion. You can quickly summarize community posts, quickies, questions, and ideas to capture the key takeaways at a glance. So here we can generate a summary of this post here, and this gives us the key takeaways there. Within SOLIDWORKS as well, in the right-hand task screen, you can access Aura to ask questions, and it will sort of pull information throughout the sort of knowledge base, user forums, etc., and official SOLIDWORKS documents. So if you're not sure on something, you can sort of ask Aura and they'll try and find the answer for you. Next is saving configurations. With 2026, you can now save configurations as a new individual physical product. This allows for greater flexibility in how you structure designs and provides full control over managing the associated references when saved. Next is the share command. So SOLIDWORKS does make it easy to seamlessly share your designs, and we've now moved this to the file menu. Sorry. You go back, sorry, yeah. Okay, next is connect with peers. The SOLIDWORKS community is the best in the industry, and the user forums have always been a rich source of information and help for everyone. Now you can access the forums directly from the SOLIDWORKS task pane, making it easier than ever to access the knowledge of the user community. You can get valuable feedback on your questions, learn from others, and participate in sharing your knowledge and insights. Next, the share command. So SOLIDWORKS design makes it easy to seamlessly share your designs right from the file menu. You can choose from an extensive list of standard formats such as PDF, STEP, STL, and IGS, and ensure security by controlling who can access your shared designs. Next is drawing stamping. So usernames, approval dates, and maturity statuses are all important parts of the change process. With SOLIDWORKS 26, drawing stamping now happens automatically within the drawing file as each change action is completed, providing a final drawing that's complete and accurate. Weldment cut lists. SOLIDWORKS now provides support for saving weldment cut lists to the 3D Experience platform. As you save your design, simply indicate that you want the cut list items published. Weldments that contain structural, sheet metal, and plates are all supported. Once saved, the cut list items are reflected in the task pane and accessible on the 3D Experience platform, allowing you to build a more accurate engineering bill of materials. External design table support. So design tables have always been a powerful way to create multiple configurations, and linking to an external design table provides convenient access to automating those configurations outside of SOLIDWORKS. Now when you save your components to the 3D Experience platform, the external design table relationship is recognized. In addition to being stored with the part, you have full visibility to the reference relationship between the two items of the design table and the part, ensuring complete design management. So if we navigate to the Relations app of the file here, we can now see the external design table shown as well. Next are the formal components. So purchase components are a key part of any design. These components, such as this gasket seal, are normally bought in bulk and then assigned a part number. And this can be deformed into their installed state. In SOLIDWORKS, you can now identify a component as deformable. To ensure proper traceability, you can associate the installed state component with the purchase component by searching for the part number and selecting from a filtered list of deformable components to match your search. So once you associate these two parts together, the two essentially share a part number, and this ensures a full traceability when you search for the part number within the search bar. Next is bookmark updates. So SOLIDWORKS now provides the ability for file locations that reference bookmarks to automatically update, ensuring that you always have access to the latest content. 3D Swim integrations. So 3D Swim communities are a powerful tool for collaborating with colleagues. Now you can extend that collaboration to include projects, issues, bookmarks, and more, making it easier than ever to have all your project information easily accessible in one place. Office document routing. Ensuring the right people in your organization review and approve a document is an important part of a release process. Now you can automate the start of a route to ensure the right people get notified for review. Once the approvals are complete, the document is automatically transitioned to release, as shown here. Next, improvements to bookmark navigation. So bookmarks are a unique way of organizing your content without duplicating it in multiple locations. Now it's easier than ever to see all the bookmarks that are referencing a design, and you can choose which bookmark to open, making accessing your content easy and efficient. Conversation groups. So chat is the modern way we communicate nowadays. It's quick, convenient, and timely compared to traditional emails. Now you can create custom groups within conversations to clearly organize your chats, making them easier to access. Next are iteration comments. So in 2026, you can now create iterations as well as provide comments to describe what has changed. Simply indicate that you want to create a new iteration during the save of your design, and then you can add a comment to provide additional clarity to that to describe the iteration. These iterations can be accessed at any time, providing you a convenient way to get back to an earlier state of your design. Finally, we have smart components. So smart components have long been a powerful way to standardize and automate the creation of features associated with a part. In 2026, the components can be fully stored on the 3D Experience platform now, making them conveniently accessible to your whole team. And when these associated features are added, it saves you time, ensuring consistent accuracy every time the component is used. And that is what's new for the collaboration section. I will now pass you over to Craig, who will go over PDM.
Thanks for that, William. So yeah, what I'll take us through is going to be some enhancements to PDM, both PDM Standard and PDM Professional. A couple of these first ones were introduced with some of the service packs of 2025. So we have a change to the behaviour when it comes to using the integrated search, or quick search as some people refer to them. Also, when we're using search favourites, we'll have some options to kind of customise before those are run. We have some changes to behaviour when it comes to the search cards as well, such things like the complete search. We also have a new enhancement, a quite big one, that's referred to as the transfer ownership or transfer command. We also have some changes to displaying the revision information by default, and an updated preview window where we can show some additional file formats as well. We have some changes to the permissions when it comes to defining the permissions on a folder basis, and we can kind of change them when it comes to kind of the subfolders or lower level folders, rather than necessarily giving all of the parent folders. We have some enhancements to the bill of materials inside the Web 2 client, and some enhancements to the various different convert tasks inside PDM as well. And then also a change to the workflows in terms of being able to archive any kind of older workflows or workflows we no longer wish to use that we're unable to delete. Having a look at the first change here when it comes to the integrated search. So if we come and start to run any of our searches in here we've got our favorite search. What we can start to do is customize that change if need be. So from our drop down we can see any of our favorites. We can obviously customize them rather than necessarily just running as is. So let's try and have a look at running some of those as well. If we select the option at the very top, we can say whether or not we want to run that as soon as you click it, or leave it blank to where there's maybe no results until you hit the kind of run command, which allows you to maybe take that favourite search, tweak it ever so slightly, and then actually run it, rather than previously in the first case we're just running it straight away. Particularly useful if you've got maybe some complex searches with various different criterias, rather than just a single search criteria in there. On that topic of searching as well, we now have some changes when it comes to kind of the wildcard side of things. So in the setup of the data card, so in the card editor, we'll have an option where we can change that to be an exact search or an implicit kind of wildcard. So that way when we start to type in a couple of words, it doesn't have to have those exact words. It might just have one part of it or a couple of those words in there. So it's particularly useful if you're trying to search for things like descriptions or that, where you might not know the full description, but you know what some of it is. Then this can definitely be helpful in there. Quite a big change here is going to be the option of being able to transfer the ownership of a file. So what there'll be cases where you might check out a file and then you decide to make some changes. Here we're just suppressing out some components, and then you'll be saving regularly. So this is just hitting your normal save button, which then saves those changes locally on your own machine. If we then jump over to a different user, we can see here that the file is still checked out by the initial user, but we have this new button called Transfer Ownership, which transfers the file, so it's no longer checked out by maybe Eric, it's now checked out by Megan, which then previously if we tried to do anything like that, we're most likely going to be kind of losing any of that work that Eric has maybe done. However, this transfer ownership option will keep any of those changes that Eric has done. Even though he hasn't technically checked in those changes, it will be periodically checking in the files kind of silently in the background, meaning that if Eric goes off on holiday for a week or two, forgets to check in a bunch of files, we're not kind of struggling to think, well, do we revert to a previous version, do we undo checkout or something like that? We can now use this new option to transfer the ownership to someone else while keeping those changes in place. So something that I think a lot of PDM customers will find extremely helpful. We also have a change to display of the revision information, particularly when it comes to both the contained and where used tab. So you should find that by default, without having to customize any sort of columns or that you'll now be able to see the revision that a file's at. In this case, we're just using an alpha revision scheme, but whatever revision scheme the file's at, we'll be able to see that information. We also have some enhancements to the preview window in PDM. So now if we're looking at some kind of non-SOLIDWORKS files, so here we've got some kind of Parasolid files, we've got some step files, we've got some STL files, and that we'll now be able to see a preview of those rather than having to import them into SOLIDWORKS, convert them to SOLIDWORKS files, or trying to open up eDrawings application separately. We can now get those previews inside the preview window, and we can obviously zoom, rotate, and have a look at them just as normal. We also have a change for the folder permissions. This is more when it comes to the PDM kind of admin side of things. If we go into a user or group and then go to change the folder permissions, in this case maybe we don't have maybe any permissions here for some of the parent folders, but if we drill down to subfolders, we can then give permissions to the individual subfolders, in which case the user will see the parent folder just generally, so that way you can obviously browse into it, but you're not going to see any of the other kind of folders or files or any of the other stuff that's in there. They will only see the information that's specifically in that subfolder that you've granted the various different permissions to in there. So it gives you a little bit more granular control if you want to use folder permissions to control who can see what type of files, and based on where they're obviously saved with the different folders For those of us with PDM Professional that are using the Web 2 side of things, we'll have a slight enhancement to be able to see all of our different bill of materials information. So if we log in to our Web 2 client, go to a file of our choice, we can now start to see all of our different information inside here, whether it be in our bill of materials format or just maybe a properties window on the right hand side. If we are looking at a bill of materials, we can actually change between our various different types of table. So obviously if we had any weldments or sheet metal stuff, we could also have potentially cut lists in there. And we can also toggle between the different configurations and see what did this BOM look like at a previous revision or a different configuration, that sort of idea. We can see all of that in the Web 2 side of things. For those of us that are using the various different types of convert, which might just be the simple task of converting a drawing to a PDF, or we could be converting a part to a step file, pretty much any of our file types. If we're outputting as a parasolid, we'll now have some updated file types. Same with kind of STL files and step files, they've been updated to the slightly newer versions of those respective files. We will also now have some additional options when it comes to outputting the file, where we'll have more control of being able to customize the scripting of those tasks. So if we want to get into a little bit of kind of coding, almost going towards the API side of things, we'll be able to see the API script for all of our different types of tasks and add-ins that we've got, and then we can customize them, update them if ever required in there. We also have a new option to be able to archive workflows. So in PDM Professional, obviously we can have as many workflows as we want, and there may be a time and a place where we kind of completely change our workflow and we decide rather than maybe using a single approval process, we change to maybe a double approval process or something quite drastic, or maybe you've created a brand new workflow. What we can do is archive that old workflow. Any workflows which are archived will no longer be used in terms of being able to have new files enter those. Any files that are already in that workflow are fine, they'll still behave as we expect, but just no new files will be going in. That way we don't need to do anything like what we used to do in terms of adding some sort of impossible condition to block files from entering that. We can just simply archive the workflow, and then obviously we can unarchive it if we ever need that back in there. We also have some changes to the setup of categories. So if we're setting up a category to then use in our workflow properties, it will now default to using the file path option, which is probably the one that was used the vast majority of the time. So that will just now be the default option rather than having to pick that all the time. You will now get a warning if you try and log into the PDM administration tool. If someone else is already logged into the PDM admin tool, that way there shouldn't be any kind of fighting in terms of changing permissions or something where you're both trying to tweak things at the same time. You'll get a prompt in there, and obviously if you need to make changes, maybe let the other person know, and they can obviously log out in there. We also have a new progress indicator if you're using the Windows logins for PDM, and that's obviously been synced to your Windows kind of Active Directory. If that sync is in progress, then when you hover over any of the kind of users groups kind of option in admin tool, it will just tell you that sync is in progress. We also have some options to control what file types are working in that preview. So we showed the preview in terms of being able to obviously use the e-drawings to see the step and parasolid and that sort of idea. But we could obviously change from that to just using a basic image as the preview, which will technically help performance. You can now change that based on the kind of groups of files. So you can say show the image for SOLIDWORKS files or the preview, for Office files and neutral CAD files, that sort of idea. We'll also have some additional options and places where we can use different system variables. So things like being able to see what the ID of a particular file is, or where that is on the archive server. Generally speaking, we hopefully shouldn't ever need to really be using or showing these bits of information, but if certain things start to go wrong in PDM, then these new options can help us try and diagnose certain issues. If you have issues with certain kind of versions and revisions of files, we can find ID and where they're stored in the server to try and recover those as needed. For any of our design libraries, whether it's design library parts or sketches, anything like that, if you're in the PDM Web 2 client, you'll now get preview kind of thumbnails, thumbnail previews of those design library parts in the Web 2 side of things. You'll also now, if you've got a kind of slow internet connection, you'll get a kind of progress indicator when you're logging into the PDM Web 2 if it starts to take a bit of time. So that way you can see that it's still in progress of logging you in. We should also find some enhancements to the performance when it comes to browsing through our folders and files in Web 2 as well. That enhancement does tend to work better the higher the latency. So those of us that have got quite a high latency, so maybe a slow internet connection, that sort of idea, then you should hopefully see a large performance improvement browsing through your different folders. There's also some enhancements when it comes to the API side of things in terms of being able to add hooks and webhooks when we're creating our API add-ins. We also have an enhancement to the file version upgrade utility. So that's when we maybe upgrade from SOLIDWORKS 2024 to 25 or 25 to 26, 26 to 27 when it comes out. That sort of idea. You might want to update your files to the newer format. We use usually the PDM file version upgrade tool to update our files. That now runs in batches of files, which should mean the overall time it takes to update all of your files should be much quicker to run. Obviously, we'll still want to usually run that kind of maybe overnight or at a time when users aren't trying to access the files, but overall it should run much quicker. When we are running that file version upgrade tool, we will be able to kind of customize a few different things. So one is we can use a CSV file to choose what files we want to upgrade. So if we don't necessarily want to upgrade every single file in our vault, we just maybe want to upgrade a handful of files, we can do that based on a CSV file. Kind of get a list of files. We can also choose, when we're creating things like the logs and stuff, we can add prefixes and suffixes to the various tools. And when we are upgrading, we can choose whether or not we want to override things like the revision or the version. So that way the file version upgrade tool doesn't create necessarily a new version of all the files in your vault when it's doing this. We can just override the latest version so that that's at the latest in there. This is just a little table of the different file formats that have been updated when it comes to that eDrawings preview. So obviously the Parasol and kind of step files. That's just a complete list of that in there. We'll also now see a slight change to the behaviour when we go to update things like our whole wizard, kind of toolbox folders. If we've created any sort of custom API triggers to run when certain things happen, we can now temporarily have them be disabled so that they don't cause any kind of issues when it comes to upgrading, that sort of idea in there. We also have a change to the encryption, so it's now using AES 256 encryption between the client, i.e. the users, and the archive server, just for better security in there. For those of us that are using the Windows login, we now have a change, which technically the change can happen from 2025 SP4 onwards, although because this is more kind of in the IT side of things, it is something that's enabled via a Windows registry key, and that's done on the server. So if you want to start to enable this, maybe you can get in touch with us before changing this, but we can now use the slightly different Windows authentication methods for that. That pretty much finishes is for the PDM side of things. So what I'll do is I'll hand it to William, who'll take us through the SOLIDWORKS electrical enhancements.
Perfect, thank you Craig. So yeah, I'll take you guys through the electrical section then. So for SOLIDWORKS electrical, we now have a simplified entry for repeated values for circuits, terminals and cable cores when using the manufactured part or cable reference import. There's a streamlined user interface for the dynamic connect insertion command, as well as the ability to assign accessory parts. We also have more flexible PDF export options, such as organizing by project, book or page. You can route selected wires separately through the route wires command. Then we have quick tooltips to show electrical design detail for each wire or cable when highlighted. We have batch defined stub lengths for all pins in a single operation. And finally, an enhanced electrical connector tables with easier connector identification. Let's have a look at these in action. Starting off with part reference import. The new Excel import option was added back in 2024 for SP3. With this initial release, the value for every terminal for every circuit and the values and separate values had to be entered manually with the appropriate delineators. In 2025 FTO2, you can now enter the repeated values only once. For example, the minimum number of wires or maximum and minimum wire size. We essentially only have to enter those values once. When we import the Excel file, SOLIDWORKS Electrical will apply that value to all terminals of all circuits. Now we'll look at improvements to dynamic connector. For 2026, what we'll do first is we'll insert a connector. In the dynamic connector insertion command, we now have an expand button. This new expanded user interface contains the selection filters to aid the selection of circuits and terminals to insert with your connector symbol. This is especially handy for connectors containing a high quantity of pins. Next are accessory parts. Our next enhancement, this was released in 25 FD01 with the component properties. We can now assign accessory parts to circuits and terminals to our base part. Simply select the accessory part, the circuit, the terminal you want to assign this accessory to, and then click Associate. You can also right mouse click on the terminal and select Associate. Lastly, you can also drag and drop the accessory to the terminal or circuit. And then once we've created that accessory, you can then create a connection label here. And then you can see that we have the additional properties inserted with our label. Export to PDF. In 25 FD02, there are some new options for exporting to PDF. Within the structure drop-down menu, we have exporting PDF by project, book, or file. There are also new defined document naming options, for formulas with options for folder name and file names. Our last option here is the orientation with the automatic option. So this is now added to allow the PDF to have the different orientations to be automatically rotated within the exported PDF. So you can see we have the varying orientations for landscape and portrait drawings. Next are route selected wires. In this example, we want to route the wires to the lights to make sure they fit in the provided holes for a support structure. We want to use this new feature, which allows you to use the selected wires within the route wires command. This option gives you the ability to route individual wires from your project. This new option is great for checking fit while still working on your design, or for better control where your wires are routed for specific design functions. Next are connector tables. So this enhancement is for electrical routing drawings. In 2026, we now have some additional route properties for displaying within your connector tables. With this new route property, you can display, for example, connected to connector property, and as long as the values are in the from to list, they will be displayed. These new columns can be updated to all tables in the drawing as well, saving you time. Some other enhancements include more advanced cables and core filtering, the new switch cable cores command, and direct navigation to schematic and component browser from the cable management window. These all can help with managing your cables more efficiently. There's now also the option to hide any unused or default system classes to simplify the classification design tree, allowing you to organize and find your components much easier. Next, we also have enhancements to the update and replace data commands. A warning message now displays when you update symbols, manufacturer parts, or cable references that have discrepancies. These discrepancies could be maybe the symbol has more connection points, the number of circuit terminals in a manufacturer part is higher, or maybe the number of cable cores in the cable reference is higher. Another enhancement is to the collaptive server. So this provides now more reliable performance through optimized client to server connections, as well as better compatibility with modern IT environments. So only the server firewalls now require the incoming ports to be open, and all communication is initiated from the client side to eliminate server to client connections. This reduces firewall complexity and enhances network security. Next, we also have enhancement to the electrical library management for the electrical schematic designer role. And we also have the new SOLIDWORKS electrical 3D role, which allows you to use the electrical 3D function within SOLIDWORKS design installed via the 3DIMXPERT platform. Let's have a look at these in action, starting off with electrical library on the cloud. This new feature introduces a streamlined process to save all new and modified local library data to your 3DIMXPERT platform, improving efficiency and ensuring data integrity across collaborative spaces. There's now one unified dialog to manage all library save operations, and we can also see a report summary to show which objects have been successfully loaded, as shown here. We also have the load and reload library commands within the dialog. Next is the new electrical 3D role. So if you have the SOLIDWORKS design role with the named user license on the 3DIMXPERT platform, you can now also get the electrical 3D role to allow you to essentially access the electrical 3D add-in. This allows you to bring your 2D schematics into your 3D and generate your electrical routes based on your schematic drawings. This integration ensures that both electrical and mechanical teams can work from a single source of truth in a cloud-connected environment, reducing errors and improving overall design quality. I will now pass you over to James.
Right, thank you, William. So we'll now take a look at the various enhancements to simulation. So the first one here is a new option for applying distributed loads on shell elements. So you'll now be able to apply that on the shell edge rather than just the faces of the shells. When it comes to the validity checks, when you are running a simulation for various instances for the errors that pop up, it will now indicate which bodies have failed, with that making it easier to figure out and fix those errors. There's also a new output plot in this for displacement. So the new option there is to plot the rotational displacement, not just the displacement in millimeters. You'll be able to plot it in degrees or radians. There's also some options for picking the default shell type. So previously, when it comes to defining a shell, you can have pick thick or thin, and it would always default to one of them. You'll now be able to have the option to find what that default should be. So if you use one more than the other, you'll be able to apply that there. Also for pin connector forces, so you're already able to extract them across various studies. The addition of random vibration studies has been added to that to extract the various forces and torques from the pins. So in this case, for a lot of simulations, we're just going to be looking at our Vermeer model, and we're going to be looking at sort of the worst case scenario, in this case where we've got the loads of it, obviously the weight of it on pushing down, as well as the kind of the thrust of it pushing the various piping into the ground. And in this case, the supports will be in 2 points, the front of the tracks and on the outrigger. So looking at this outrigger, we'd obviously want to make sure that it's nice and secure and it's not going to fail and cause the machine to fall over or lose its position. So we want to obviously simulate this to minimize the displacement. So in order to make sure we've got a good realistic setup, we're going to use our various enhancements for this one. So the first one here is shell edges. Here I want to apply this remote load to the shell edges. So previously I would have had to use like a split face command and apply it on the actual face itself on the side of it. Now I'll be able to just apply it directly to those shell edges to make sure I've got as realistic possible setup that I can do for those. So here I can now apply those and that will solve all nice and easily for me. Next thing we're going to look at here is the sort of feedback warnings for when you've got some errors. So in this case here, one of the bodies does not have a material applied to it. Previously it wouldn't tell you which body that was the case. Now it will list the body and we can just copy that and pop it into the filter in the tree and see that body nice and easily, where we can then apply that to it. So it just makes setting the assembly up a lot easier in simulation, where you have maybe multiple bodies and one's missing a material. Rather than have to hunt through that manually, you can let the simulation tell you exactly which one it needs applied to. Displacement plots here. So now what we'll be able to look at is pull out displacement in radians or degrees. Just a case of defining a new displacement plot and then picking in the drop down, rather than the displacement in X, Y or Z directions, we can pick the rotation about the different axes, and we can pick those to have them output. It's a nice little option. You don't need to manually calculate them or anything. We can just have them directly output in the new displacement plot option there. Shell definition, so this is just that default option here. So here for define it defaults to thin, but if I'm basically going to be doing a lot of thick shells, then what I can do is in the simulation options, I can just open that up and I have the option here in the default options just to pick the default shell type there, so I can switch it to thick and have that be used instead. So here now, when I then go and define the shell, you can see it's now default to thick and I don't need to then change that. So it just saves you a click every time if you are using one more than the other. Pin connector forces. So here, in this case, this is just a random vibration study that's been ran. Previously, we wouldn't be able to extract any of the forces for the various pinning connectors. Now we'll be able to do that. So here, we can just list those connector forces and we'll get all the various forces, shears, torques, bending moments, etc. out of all of those connectors. So this is a nice handy little thing we can do. So we can extract it from the connectors there, whether it's all connectors or specific connectors. We can also plot these in a response graph as well. So obviously, when it comes to running vibration studies, there might be some certain resonant natural frequencies where obviously the forces will expect to peak. We can easily find those from a response graph and find what those peak forces are and where they are with that. Moving on to various things to do with more sort of seismic studies and beam studies. We'll take a look at these. So first one here is we'll now be able to have more options when it comes to defining our loads on beams. So previously we were a bit limited on how we can apply the forces in terms of distributing loads across multiple beams. Now what we'll be able to do is we'll have the option between per item and total. So in this case, when we're applying the load on these beams, we can say per item, and then that will apply that same load across each beam. Total will then distribute that load across all of the beams, or we also then subsequently have the option to do per unit length as well. So if you have a certain load per length, we don't need to then figure that out and apply different loads per beams. We can now just apply that with one easy tick box there. Next option here is the seismic response studies. So here we're now able to define remote masses. So we no longer need to model sort of just lumped masses to put on top of this. In this case here, if we're going to have a mass that's going to be applying on this, all we need to do is simply apply that, position its center mass, add in how much the mass is, and apply that and run it. So that's saving on having to create that geometry as well as having to mesh it as well. So very much making these studies a lot more efficient to run and quicker to set up. Next up, when it comes to buckling studies, we can now filter out the negative eigenvalues. So previously you would just get the first 5 if you let's say they asked for 5, you just get the first 5 whether they're positive or negative. You'll now be able to have the option to say only extract the positive buckling factors from that. So in this case now, when we run that, we'll now only have those first 5 there, and that just saves you having to potentially increase that number if you are looking for only positive buckling factors from that. Now some performance improvement with connectors. So simulation runtime has been improved for studies, particularly with lots of connectors as well. So you'll see that reduction in time it takes to solve those. So handy. Obviously you're already using connectors to speed up the analysis. This will speed it up further there. So it's a nice little improvement with that. There's another fix for quite a specific issue. In SOLIDWORKS 2025, if you had a connector that had more than 800 edges in the mesh on that connector, then it would fail to run, which would obviously require a rather refined mesh. But now with 2026, that will be able to run without any issues. So if you are running very refined meshes, you'll no longer run into any potential issues with connectors. So that is the structural sim side of things. Alright, so continuing on to look at the plastic simulation. So we'll move on and see what's new in the plastic simulation. So this is the plastic injection molding simulation. So some enhancements we've got, obviously more materials been added, performance has been improved across the board for all the various different study types, and there's a new plot for the unfilled volume. There's also been improvements to the edge vent analysis, as well as some adjustments for thermosetting studies as well. So let's take a look at these in action. So plastics has an extensive material library with lots of various different polymers and things in it. So there's been enhancements to what the materials have been added. So more material has been added, more material sort of classifications have been added. There's a full list there of those, as well as the enhancements to performance for the various fill, pack and cool simulations. So they'll all run nice and quickly. Here, the unfilled volume plot. So previously, if you wanted to see what parts of your models were not filled, you just have to look at the fill time and then look at what was grey. On more complicated geometries, it might be more difficult to see exactly what was unfilled, or you might miss some parts. So now with the unfilled volume plots, we can see that those unfilled areas will be highlighted in grey and the rest of the model will be transparent, making it nice and easy to see exactly which areas have not been filled by the plastic injection molding process. The air venting analysis. So previously, when it came to doing the air venting, you could only select vertex points. So in this case, we can see we've got some actually unrealistic pressure results from this one. So with the new options, we can actually pick the edges to more realistically represent how those air vents would be. They wouldn't be just infinitely small points. They would actually have some size to them along the edges. So we can now pick those edges to be the air vents in our analysis. So now when we run the analysis, we'll get a lot more realistic results from those. So a nice little improvement there. Thermosetting materials. So you can now set the parameters for solving those based on the curing at the ejection time. So in this case here with the criteria, we can do curing or time based, and here we can set a target for curing at a specific level here for this one. So now when we run it and we look at the results, we can then look at the queuing at the ejection point and filter based off that to see, okay, at 80% queuing, basically all of our model has been cured, and it's just the runners that are not cured at that 80% level for when we're ejecting it. So that's the plastic sim. Flow simulation, let's look at the enhancements for that. So with flow simulation, the first enhancement here is the surface source. So you now be able to summarize all the same surface sources and group them. So if you've got surface sources with the same power output, they'll be grouped together in one bubble with just several leader arrows coming off that. So it just makes it a lot easier to take a look at your model, and you'll have a lot less duplicated labels from that one. 2 resistor features, you can now use them and be fully supported in the component explorer, and there's also 2 ways you can then create them. So you can either create them in the engineering database, or you can import their data from Excel as well to create those. The new fill thin slot feature. So this is a new feature where you can fill a predefined thickness value with a material. Now this material isn't physically modelled, it is applied in the mesh level with whatever thickness below thickness level that you define. So this is helpful if you've got any sort of glues or thermal interface material that you want to apply in between components, but you don't have to physically model those in. Then you can just set the thickness criteria and the meshing will ultimately apply those models. And also, because they're only applied in the mesh, you can actually only see where those materials have been applied with post-processing to it. The other enhancement here to the goals is you'll now also be able to output the location of the goals. So for example, the maximum temperature. Previously, you could output the goal of just, what is the maximum temperature and track it. You'll now also be able to track its location. So is there a hot spot moving around at all? You'll be able to now easily graph that with the various X, Y, and Z locations for it. Parametric studies, there's a new bubble chart that will allow you to easily visualize lots of different parameters with that. So obviously you've got your 2 parameters on the axis, you've got color gradients, you've got the size of the bubbles. So you can visualize all those differences nice and easily in the bubble chart. Also, when it comes to if you are running a parametric study where you have a lot of parameters set up, you'll now be able to pull them from the submodels. So if you have components that have already been set up with parameters, you'll no longer have to redefine them. You can pull them from those submodels, which just saves setup time and improves consistency as well. Component status. So the component status has been added to the component explorer that allows you to toggle them on and off nice and easily without having to go into any of the other windows to do that, as well as a new temperature status that's been added to the component explorer. So if you did want to have the temperature of any of the volumes, rather than having to set up goals for every single body, you can now just explore those and see those in the component explorer. So that is the enhancements there to flow simulation. What I'll now do is I'll now pass you across to William, who's going to look at DraftSight.
Perfect. Thanks, James. So yeah, I'll take you through DraftSight now. So in DraftSight 2026, we now have a start page to show recent files, favorites, and learning resources in one place. We have power tools to streamline workflows, as well as floating windows to allow display on multiple windows across different monitors. We also have diesel expressions to automate tasks with scripting, pattern ribbons, gradient ribbons, importing large ECW files, and then finally the BIM module to import Revit and IFC files to generate 2D floor plans. Let's have a look at these in action, starting off with the new start page. So this is available for DraftSight Premium, Enterprise Plus, and Mechanical, and this appears when the program launches. It centralizes key tasks like opening recent files, creating new drawings, and accessing templates. It also integrates learning tools, product updates, and quick links to online learning resources all directly within this one interface. Next are Power Tools. So Power Tools enable greater efficiency with its full suite of 43 automation commands. For example, with the pattern hatch tool, we can choose a custom block, for example. Once we choose our block, we can essentially turn that into a hatch. In the past, you may have had to create hatches manually, but now with this Power Tool, it is much more convenient to apply a hatch to your drawing. The hatch pattern can be customized. For example, you can adjust the scale factor and size. Next are floating windows. So the new floating window feature lets you drag drawing tabs to another monitor, giving you freedom to work across multiple screens. This can boost your productivity by viewing, editing, and referencing different files side by side for faster and more efficient design workflow. Next are diesel expressions. Now, this is not the diesel you know that you put into cars. Diesel here stands for Direct Interpretively Evaluated String Expression Language. It is a string-based macro language that can dynamically generate text, especially in menus, status bar entries, and custom commands. For example, it can allow you to extract dynamic data from drawings such as file paths or names without having to rely on external Lisp routines. Next are pattern ribbons. Previously, you may have created a pattern and then used the preview and or the undo command to undo the pattern. So essentially, you're having to keep flipping back and forth the dialog boxes. Now you can dynamically adjust the spacing, the count and layout of patterns without having to switch between the preview and undo commands. This streamlined layout makes creating and editing patterns a lot more easily. Next are gradient ribbons. Similar to the pattern ribbon, there's now an interface for gradient hatching, allowing you to apply a gradient to your drawing, change the color and layering dynamically. This makes it much easier to visualize the changes that you are applying in real time. Next are attaching ECW files. So ECW stands for Enhanced Compression Wavelet, and these files are commonly used for satellite maps and aerial photography. These can now be imported into DraftSight 2026. So we can, for example, take a crop sample of this satellite image here. You'll then be able to scale these images using recognizable elements such as this car park. We can then insert a block from our library, such as this car here, to validate that it is indeed scaled correctly. Finally, we have the BIM module. So the BIM module was introduced in DraftSight 2025 SP3 and it has been continuously improved in 2026 as well. You can now import Revit and IFC models. This allows you to take floor plans, elevations, and material takeoff lists directly from the imported BIM data. Importing these models also retains a link to the file, so if the original BIM model changes, then you will also see the changes reflected within DraftSight, enabling real-time collaboration. And that's what's new with DraftSight. I will now move on to Composer. So in Source Composer 2026, you can now use the import PNG and TIFF image file formats. So this can be used within the texture workshop. You can use the PNG and TIFF image files for textures now, and you can also The next enhancement is also the support of multiple image formats for videos. So since up to 2025 is only supported bitmaps, now you can use bitmap, PNG, JPEGs, and TIFF image formats for animation frames while creating videos using the Video Workshop. You have more image format options for animation frames as well. Generating videos is easier and faster now. You can use these image formats for MP4, MKV, and FLV output video formats. Finally, the last enhancement for Composer, the collection name and collection index file name template options are available in the Views section of the Technical Illustration and High Resolution Workshop. This makes working with workshops easier. You can apply the view index keyword to assign an accurate index for newly created views, for example. So these syntaxes give you more control on defining the output file names for exports. And that is what's new for Composer. I'll now pass you over to Craig.
Alright, that's that, William. So yeah, what I'm going to do is to kind of almost finish us off is going to be talk a little bit about some of the requirements for SOLIDWORKS 2026, and also a wee slight kind of name change they might already see from the preview image. So Windows 10 obviously is no longer supported by Microsoft. That ended in October of last year. So obviously most people are going to want to update to Windows 11. Now for SOLIDWORKS, Windows 11 officially started support with SOLIDWORKS 2022 SP2. So if you are looking to update to Windows 11, or maybe just recently updated to Windows 11 by your IT, then normally you want to be looking at using SOLIDWORKS 2022 or newer in there. Doesn't mean obviously those that are still using older versions of SOLIDWORKS, technically that will still work in terms of it's not going to stop working if you want to stick with Windows 10. You may obviously not get security updates from Microsoft, but technically it will still work for the older versions of SOLIDWORKS if you have to stay on that. Technically speaking, only the 3 most recent versions of SOLIDWORKS are officially supported by SOLIDWORKS in terms of getting any sort of enhancements or updates in there. So at the moment that would be 2026, 2025 and 2024 in there. So usually we try and recommend people stick with the 3 most recent versions. Just got a little table here to kind of confirm that information. So obviously if you're wanting to go to SOLIDWORKS 2026 or newer, when 2027 comes out at the end of the year, then obviously you want to be on Windows 11 for the user side of things. For those of us that have things like SOLIDWORKS PDM, SOLIDWORKS Electrical, or maybe you're just using the network licenses, so generally that's where you'll have a server be involved. If you're wanting to go to 2026, then you'll need to be on Windows Server 2019 or newer. Windows Server 2019 will go end of support with 2026, meaning that Windows Server 2019 will not work for SOLIDWORKS 2027 when it comes out. So if you are going to update, then I would probably look into get Windows Server 2022 or 2025 in there if you're looking for that. For those of us that use PDM and therefore need to use SQL, which could also be actually for our electrical users as well, then we'll need to be using SQL 2019 or newer. Similar to Windows Server, SQL 2019 will not work for SOLIDWORKS 2027 when it comes out. So we probably want to be looking at using SQL 2022 in there. SQL 2025 is also supported if you're using SOLIDWORKS 2026 and beyond in there. When it comes to updating to 2026, I would say and recommend that you get in touch with ourselves. Obviously we can then help check any of those kind of server requirements and the SQL, the OS, that sort of idea. And we can also help carry out and pretty much perform any of the upgrades to try and make sure things go as smoothly as possible. So that way there's not any issues where the OS isn't correct, or you have issues updating toolbox or user settings, and generally speaking, we try and minimize any sort of downtime or disruptions. So if you are considering upgrading, whether it be to 2026 or maybe you just want to update 2025, then do just get in touch with us and we can help you out with any of those upgrades. One thing that you might see with 2026 and going forward is a slight kind of name change when it comes to SOLIDWORKS. So a lot of us will be used to using SOLIDWORKS Standard, SOLIDWORKS Professional, SOLIDWORKS Premium. What you'll now see is pretty much after the word SOLIDWORKS, you'll see the word Design be used. Reason for that is just that the word on its own, SOLIDWORKS, is generally meant to define the overall kind of brand rather than it be a specific product that we use. So if you see from 2026 onwards things like SOLIDWORKS Design Standard, it's just the name that's changed. It's not a completely new product or anything like that. And that's true of whether or not you're using the kind of desktop versions of SOLIDWORKS or whether you're using the 3D experience side of things. After the word SOLIDWORKS, we'll see the word Design be added in there. So here on the left, we have obviously the desktop version of SOLIDWORKS, and that's where we can either have our standalone licenses, which will be activated and locked to machines, or it could be network licenses. Or on the right hand side, we have the 3D Experience platform, and that's where you'll have your named user license side of things. And obviously each of those will be deployed separately. Those will both have the word Design added into it. And obviously on top of either of those, we can obviously add more 3D Experience options. With the left, we'll usually go with cloud services. So if you've bought any kind of licenses recently or going forward, generally they'll come with cloud services with all the enhancements that come with that. And obviously those will be automatically kind of built in with the 3D Experience platform versions of SOLIDWORKS Design in there. So generally speaking, we'll have SOLIDWORKS Design with cloud services and SOLIDWORKS Design offer when it comes to the platform. And obviously you'll still have your standard, professional, premium, and technically also ultimate in there as well. So that's going to be the kind of 4 different tiers of SOLIDWORKS that you can purchase and start to use. There is also for the governments, obviously we've looked a little bit about PDM and we've looked a little bit about kind of some of the stuff with the Experience platform. We still have the 3 different tiers for each of those. Obviously the bottom right one there with the PLM Premium, with the platform, that one has just come out with the release of 2026 FD01 that came out at the start of February in there. And that pretty much finishes off with most of the content. It pretty much finishes up and gives a little summary. I'll pass it back to William, who will close us out.
Perfect, thanks Greg. So we've now sort of reached the end of our launch event. We hope you enjoyed the things that you saw today. There were loads of features and enhancements to help improve productivity and collaboration. Some of our favourite enhancements include the one from PDM, the transfer ownership, allowing you to keep files synchronized across machines with changes from other users. And the other enhancement that's one of our favourites is a simulation one, which is the new loading option for beams and shell elements, which expands simulation accuracy with distributed force support in shell models and allows user to better mimic real-world loading conditions. And then finally, our last favourite enhancement is Aura, the new AI assistant. This allows you to ask questions to Aura, something maybe you're not sure how something works within SOLIDWORKS. Aura can pull the answer for you. You can ask Aura questions and it will sort of pull from various sources, such as the official help documents, the knowledge base, and forums as well. So thank you for joining us to seeing the highlights of the best release ever of SOLIDWORKS.